This video to show how to add the accelerometer to adjust the background color of the screen in the color slider project. The first thing that is needed is you need to add an accelerometer designer component to the screen. Underneath sensors on the left hand side, you can bring out accelerometer sensor and just drop it anywhere on the screen. It ends up below the screen as a non-visible component, because you don't actually interact with it on the screen, but you need to be able to have it there to be able to interact with it in the background of the program. Once that's on there, you can go to the blocks editor. We're going to be using the accelerometer sensors when it changes its values. So if we click on it here, we can see that it has its set of blocks, and the one we want is accelerometer acceleration change, so we can bring that out on the screen. Now the way the accelerometer works is it measures the force applied on the tablet in three directions: in the X direction, the Y direction, and the Z direction. When a tablet is just sitting still, it is the only force that's being applied on it is the force due to gravity. So the value is going to be 9.8 meters per second squared as it's being as a force of gravity is going to be applied to it. Or 9.8 meters per second of force. So that's the reading you'll get. If you would flip the tablet, and one of these then, when it's just sitting flat, will be about 9.8 or close to 10 if we round it off. If you would flip it over the other way, it'd be negative 10 or negative 9.8. And the same is true for all three of these. So we have a range of values from these three of negative 10 to positive 10. We'll talk about those, how we're going to use those in a second. What we want to do, though, is we want to set the color of the background of the screen. If we look up here, we can see we set the paint color of the canvas by using the Make a Color block from a list of the red, green, and blue global variables, which are controlled by the thumb sliders. We're instead going to use the accelerometer values to make our list. But again, we don't want to set the color of the canvas, the paint color of the canvas, because otherwise it would just draw over our circles or paint over our circles. So let's go to the screen 1, and in there we can find there is a background color, set screen 1 background color block. So that's what we're going to change. We want to change it to a specific color, so underneath colors we can choose the Make Color block. And that brings out all the other blocks we need to make a list, and then 3 values. The colors are made up of red, green, and blue components. And each of those values, red, green, and blue, the first, second, and third, has a value between 0 and 255. We know that from our sliders that we did before. However, as I said before, we want to use the X accelerometer, the Y accelerometer, and the Z accelerometer values. And those have a range of negative 10 to positive 10. So we're going to have to do a little bit of arithmetic to those numbers in order to make them fit within the range that we need, 0 to 255. So first I'm going to get one of them by hovering over it, and I can click on Get XXL and just pull that out. Notice that it gives a little red exclamation triangle, because this is what's called a local variable, meaning it's only available in this block right here. All the other ones are global. You can see these that are called global are available anywhere. If it's not attached to this block, it doesn't have a value or a meaning. That's why it's giving me a warning. But we're going to put it back in a minute. Now if I were to put this value straight in for the red value, now it would be looking for color or values to make a color, and this would have again a range of negative 10 to positive 10. But the acceptable range of values is 0 to 255, so I don't want to just use the direct sensor value. If I'm going to adjust it so that it's not negative 10 to positive 10, I have to do 2 pieces of arithmetic. The first thing I can do is add 10 to it, because then instead of going from negative 10 to positive 10, it'll go from 0 to 20. So I will go to the math section and bring out a plus block. You might wonder, well, why is that better to go from 0 to 20 instead of negative 10 to positive 10? We're still going to have to do more to modify it, but at least now we don't have any negative numbers, which would be invalid for making a color. Now we're going from 0 to 20, because negative 10 plus 10 would be 0, and then 10 plus 10 would be 20. But I want to get from 0 to 255. So now if I want to make my range larger, I can multiply. So I'm going to bring out a multiplication block, put this block inside it. And if I want to multiply to get up to 255, 0 is where I'm going to start. 0 times 0 is 0. But what times 20 is 255? Well, as close as we can get, or we're getting reasonably close, we can put in the value 12.7. And that'll get us reasonably close to 255. Now I have to attach this back to the block. And I want to use the same thing, but for the Y accel and the Z accel. But I don't need to recreate the whole thing. Let me just get rid of these two blocks. And then I can right-click on this one and duplicate it. And then change it from the X accel to the Y accel. And then duplicate it again. And change it to the Z accel. Now I will have ranges between 0 and approximately 255 for each of my three values, X accel, Y accel, and Z accel, to create a color from 0 to 255 for each component that I can use on my background, which will change as I turn it. One final little thing is that once this starts working, you'll see that it should be working, but the values are really a little jumpy, because these accelerometers are very sensitive, and any little motion changes the values. If we want to round that off a little bit so that it's not quite so jittery as far as changes, we can use a round function. So I'm going to bring out round, and I'm going to put that in front of the accelerometer value for each of those. And that's just going to smooth it out a little bit so that it doesn't get quite so jumpy for each of the values that the accelerometer sensor can be returning. Alright, you should be either able to connect this app to your tablet or package it and download it and run it, and you can see how the accelerometer sensors are used to change the background color of the screen.